Washington is an interesting transfer portal strategy.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Lars, we got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers on this Tuesday. We're going to talk about how there's no pressure on Washington in this upcoming rivalry game against the Oregon Ducks. We're talking about some of the interesting comments that Jedd Fisch had where he might have tipped his hand at the quarterback position. We'll stay tuned for some of that. We're going to get there, have a lot of fun with it. But Lars, we need to talk transfer portal because Jedd Fisch, as he met with us and other members of the media on Monday, talked about what his plan is for the transfer portal, how he's going to sit everybody down after the season, talked a little bit about, some dollars. That's all I feel like we can say there, where he said, money in those discussions are going to have to be had because that's just what college football is and everything along those lines. But I thought it was really interesting, everything he had to say, and enlightening as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jedd's always enlightening. When is Jedd not enlightening? Jedd's like the Jedi Yoda in that sense. But I mean, that's kind of also what we thought, right? Where when I asked him, where do you see allocating the resources most? Is it quarterback? Is it the obvious NFL positions, left tackle, cornerback, things like that? But it was really more or less about kind of affirming what we've been saying on the show, where we're getting big in the trenches. We get 6 offensive linemen. You can't say it without saying it, but when he was like, we want to build through the draft, the high school recruitment, those sort of things. And it's like, yeah, everything he's saying is matching up, which I think kind of goes against what most people had said about Jedd, especially coming into Washington when he was like always a used car salesman. He'll say one thing and do another. Is he perfect about it? No. When he says Damon's 85% of these 73, okay, shout out. But aside from that, it's like we're not necessarily worried about necessarily all the numbers here because every fan can go look and see what Damon's completion percentage is. They can go see what Will's interception ratio is. So it's not when he talks about things like that, we're not really going to nitpick here. But in terms of how they're building the roster, I mean, it's A, what fans should want to hear, and B, kind of what's been lining up to what we've seen.
Yeah. Where I like where you're going with that, because one of the first things that really stood out to me is he talked about getting bigger, where we talked about it the last couple of days with Isan Tafa and with Peter Lange's commitments, where getting bigger is really important. Talked about that, and it happens on both sides of the ball, where he references Howie Roseman. We know, friend of Jedd's there, talked about, hey, he talks about wanting to build a team a certain way, and it's building through the offensive and defensive lines, building in the trenches. Yeah, that's a big part of it. But he also spent time saying, yeah, we're going to have a conversation with each one of our players after the season, because this is, as the transfer portal world becomes a little bit more clear, he was really open and honest about this is how we're going to have to re-recruit our players. And, I feel like we see these comments all the time on Twitter, here in the YouTube comments from the everydayers, where it's, I'm terrified of losing Damon Williams, Jonah Coleman, Denzel Boston, insert X player here, which are like, it's going to need a huge bag to keep those guys. I feel like you can say that about every school. So that's like its own, to be honest, exhausting conversation to be had, because it's not like, this is not a unique scenario to Washington, but the way Jedd talked about it was great, where he said, we know that it's not always about money. It's about geography. It's about playing time. It's about this, about that. And we're going to have conversations with all of our guys where we lay everything out with them and say, hey, this is what we see for you. This is what we want for you. This is why we want you here. And, I look at his time at Arizona and I say, he did a really good job keeping those teams together. He did a really good job building those teams where you want them to be. And I feel like he can do that here too.
No, I agree. And I think now that he finally has the whole sample size, because otherwise you're recruiting from what you were selling at Arizona, which was basically, let's be real, just immediate playing time. Like McMillan is like, hey, like you can break Arizona's receiving records here. It's like, Noah Fafita, you can take Jane Delura's spot. It's just like, it's all these sorts of things. But again, what was the one kind of similarity that, obviously Jedd couldn't build at Washington because he only had his Arizona roster to pick from. And when I say pick from, of the guys that decided to go in the portal, again, this isn't hey, Jedd can say, hey guys, I want to bring these 12 players with me. Right. It's like, it's a lot different than like, hey, you guys, Jedd actually even acknowledged that. It's worth repeating for, people may have forgotten. He didn't really have that big of a team meeting when he left Arizona because, in a way, the current structure of not NIL, but just transfer portal and everything is you can't tell your guys, you can't hold a team meeting like, hey, guys, so I'm going to go take this job and I'm going to read off a bunch of names. And when you hear your name, go pack your bags because we're flying to Seattle this afternoon. It's, you guys have to choose to want it. And, some guys chose to stay at Arizona, and looking at that schedule, looking at those results, I would kind of, hopefully those guys got paid certainly worth it to not make a bowl game this season. I don't want to dunk on them too bad, but I'm just like, man, how do you how? Because we had heard all the Arizona fans, oh, thank God Jedd's gone, all this and that. It's like, no, Washington fans want to make sure we're investing and people are investing, and that's where Washington is at. And so, could you get a couple more Arizona linemen? Obviously, Jonah Coleman ended up probably going to the NFL. Maybe because you pick up one or two of those guys, who knows? But it's about now that Jedd's got his selling at Washington and what he's been able to do on both offense and defense. Because think about it. You're looking at linebacker next season. They're bringing in a ton. ZRS, Epperson, Dylan Robinson. The list goes on and on at the high school level. You might want to add a portal linebacker given how many guys you're losing. No sides of Kamori. You're playing next to Kamori. So it's not going to be a Brian Parham situation. You're basically going and getting one versus getting two or three. And so now you can say, look at what our linebackers did this year. All those selling points are now there that Jedd didn't previously have. And he's also now got the whole window to work with, unlike just last year where it was late window that was created by his own doing.
So I like where you're going with that when you talk about linebacker, because I feel like you can say that at every position, where no matter what position you look at and you say, hey, this is a selling point. This is what we can do for you. You look at the defensive line and you say, look at how impactful Sebastian Valdez was. Look at how before he got hurt, how we were helping Javon Parker reach his potential. Look at the way we've helped, Isaiah Ward and Zach Durfee improve on the edge, Foy Tanufi as well at corner. Look at the leaps and bounds Thaddeus Dixon has improved in at safety. Look at how impactful Cam Fab has been this season. Wide receiver. Look at what we developed Denzel Boston into. Giles Jackson. Tight end. Look what we're doing with senior Kaleki Latu, who clearly has not had coaching like this in his career. Look at freshman Decker DeGraff. Offensive line. Enoch Vimahai was somebody who there were a lot of questions about because he didn't start much. You can go through every position and say, hey, this is a way we found a way to maximize the talent of this guy. And so you can take that into the portal and sell that. And at the same point, I'm really curious with this current roster because I'm not super concerned. Where when I look around this roster, the big pieces that are coming back that you and I have spent the majority of the bye week talking about, saying, hey, this is a guy we were like in 25 and beyond. This is a guy. That's a guy. Where I'm not too concerned about many, if any, of those pieces departing for a bigger bag per se. Like that's the only way to put it. Where the one position that I would really look at and say, this is the one that you need to find a way to not only keep together and really build on and say, this is where we have the most room to grow, is defensive tackle. And I look at all this and I look at, Jonah Coleman, Damon Williams, Denzel Boston, whatever. I feel like those guys are sticking around. But I look at Elinneus Davis and I say, that's the one guy who you want to find a way to build and capitalize around him and say, this is a guy we really like. And him and Javon Parker, obviously, if he can, make sure he's healthy by the time the season comes around, if you can build around those two guys and bring in a key transfer or two, all of a sudden you're really cooking with something there.
Yeah, Elinneus Davis is kind of like, as you were going through the names, think about it. The edge room is also going to be one where you're looking at how many guys, but that's also why the selling point has been, look how much we rotate our guys in, where it's Jacob Wade, it's Lance Holtzclaw, X, Y, and Z, and you're looking at that room and thinking, well, maybe some of those guys could transfer, but then the selling point is like, but all you guys play. Now, I guess if you're looking for more snaps, well, then earn them in practice. I mean, you have Steve Belichick as your defensive coordinator. It's not like he's picking favorites here. And so when you just look at it, there's no reason why Washington shouldn't be able to reload at the key positions. Yeah, I mean, unless somebody wants to come and drop like $10 million on Damon, I don't think that's, ever going to happen. And I think, honestly, even if it does, there's just a different level of connection that, it's like, I remember the Wilner article where it's like, oh, somebody might take Damon away. And it's like, right. Somebody might take, if you want to make that case about Dash Beerley or Tristan Keeney McMillan, I'm not saying I would believe it, but there's way more plausibility in flipping a recruit than there is flipping a freshman quarterback who's going to play in all 12 games this season and potentially have one start coming into next season.
Sorry, Lars, we got to move on because there's some breaking news. We're shifting the show around mid-gear. right after a message from our good friends over at Game Time, because Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets, which is great news for anybody in the Seattle area who wants to check out Husky basketball, the Kraken, the Seahawks. There's so many great deals you can find over on the Game Time app because the Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. All in pricing, you can toggle this feature and it shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. And with seat views, you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So Lars, right in the middle of the first segment, Washington gets a new commit. 3-star offensive lineman Ah Deong Yang from nearby Roosevelt High School. We literally just talked about it. We had to switch up the show to make sure we got this in there because Jedd Fisch talked about getting bigger and getting more physical in terms of adjusting to the Big Ten. This is a great way to do it.
I mean, if any indication of his height and weight and measurables or any consideration when you look at either his Twitter page or X, whatever, which is 6'4", 322, which is what he claims in his bio, or you go on 247 and 6'3", 343. Whichever one of the two you want to pick, still promising. Like, again, 343? Yeah, 343 on 247. That it's just there's two sides to this. One, shout out Big Sam Adams. Sam Adams, running back junior's dad, who's now the head coach at Roosevelt, kind of turning that program around. Really again, as a former NFL guy, you love to see when those guys go in there because for a fact he's going to put, as a former defensive lineman, he's going to emphasize the trenches like there's no tomorrow, which is perfect if you're Jedd Fisch. And then you look at his offer list and it's like, look, why not get in there early? He's got, I think Washington, I can't tell if they're the only offer or not, but there's other schools, Oregon's a list of schools that's interested, those sort of things. And other schools are going to come. But I think it's a massive sign for Washington to say, you know what? We care so much about the state of Washington and recruiting. You took Watson-Lobie in the 26th class, Terrence Arion in the 26th class. Now you're saying let's go back a little bit closer to home. Basically, Roosevelt's almost in UW's backyard at this point, like straight up in their backyard. And at this point, jump on it and get it now.
Absolutely. That's what I wanted to say is you go look at it and there are certainly going to be people, oh, he's not ranked. Oh, he doesn't have that many offers. Oh, what kind of take is this? No. This is one of those ones where you find a way to where, you get him committed early. That's fine. He's somebody who, in all likelihood with the ranking might not be the highest ranked player in the class, but that doesn't matter when you go and you turn on the film and you say, wait, Lars, as you said, whichever weight you want to believe. Twitter says 6'4", 322. 247 says 6'3", 343. Whatever one it is, that's what you're looking for. That's the size that Jedd Fisch is talking about that you're trying to get in the Big Ten. And doing it closer to home is also critical in that same point where, it's going to be really hard sometimes where, when I did the bonus show where we talked about Essen Taffa, I spent a decent amount of time saying, hey, Tommy Tofi is a guy that you really want to take a look at down at Archbishop Reardon, who's a teammate of Peter Lange's. Maybe Kean Pepe down at IMG, where you want to try to go win those battles as well. But at the same point, because those are guys who, you can play them early. You find ways to say, hey, this is a really talented dude. We love this take. At the same point, this is a take that when I think about just Washington recruiting in recent years, I think about a guy like Kelly Tafai, where it's somebody who with a nice projectable frame that you say, all right, we really like this guy because this is somebody who you look at that frame and just his build, you say that's an interior guy for sure. But you look at all of that and you just say, this is a guy who we think we can project. And maybe, 3 years down the line, he's a rotational piece. And you say, oh yeah, like that's a guy who's on the roster where I don't mean that any of this is a slight, but I mean, this is in terms of, this is what I really like about this coaching staff is they take guys like this and they find ways to maximize them, but it's a process. So you can take somebody like this really early on in the cycle and say, we're going to, let him sit. We're going to let him develop. We're going to really get his body right for a couple of years. But we look at that size and you say, why am I going to go wade into the waters of, I don't know, even like further west in Utah? Why am I going to go to Colorado or try to go down to Texas or to Alabama to take, to be respectful, a random 3-star that is going to give me a somewhat similar frame when I can just go in my backyard and do it right now.
So one name that comes to mind, maybe not like a like for like body example, but in a way that how they got him, Gardner Memlar. Go into Idaho way early on in the process. I think it was almost a year plus out. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure it's roughly at least 12 months out, if not 16 months out when they added him. And it's one of those, really? We're taking guard first? And by the way, there's no slight guard, because then you go to A, because then A, you go turn on the tape, and then B, you see the projectability. And now look, guard's been almost a 2-year starter, would have been a 2-year starter, if not for last, those sort of things last season and whatever. But you look at it and say, that's the projectable type. And you're talking about the overall number of 85. By the time he enrolls, by the time DeYoung enrolls, you're thinking about the offensive line is going to look already a lot different. McCree's probably gone. So one of the 2 redshirt freshmen is probably gone. And there's enough rotation in there to say, look, we're going to play you guys all early until that way we can get a sense of what you guys look like. And if we realize it's not a fit, you keep moving on. Almost in a way, it's like, would you look back at the take of Victor Kern, right? You go into Texas, you take a 3-star. Okay, solid take, could be not. Could you find that guy a little closer to home and then reallocate other resources, time and everything like that to go get maybe a defensive lineman from Texas? I mean, wish they could have got Chase Sims and those sort of things, because man, those are the resources you go out of state for. The rest, the majority, you can kind of stay on the West Coast, and that's one thing Jedd has said is like, look, we're going to establish the home front, keep the West Coast tradition, but if we have relationships and we want to, if kids in Pennsylvania are seeing us and like, oh wow, you know what, like I actually want to go check out Washington, and he's a 4-star lineman, and just the reverse. Oh, there was a GK offensive lineman who's now at Penn State. I forgot the name.
Big Iona,
where it's like the kind of the reverse of that, where it's like instead of going all the way to Penn State, maybe some kid in Pennsylvania says, hey, you know what? Yeah, you can sprinkle those in here and there.
Right.
But the base of your operation and the base of the class should be on the West Coast. And if you can, maybe a little closer to home in this case in Udo's backyard.
So we're on the same page today. That's exactly what I wanted to get into. This is the 8th commit that Washington has now had between the first 2 cycles. I don't have the 23 and 24 numbers in front of me, but I'm about 100% sure that might be more than the total number that the Kalen DeBoer staff as a total took between 22, 23, 24. Even if you want to go like back that far, this coaching staff is really making an investment. And obviously you think about that 22 class when Kalen DeBoer came in, and you think Josh Connerly. Obviously that didn't end the way you wanted it to. But outside of that, like where Jedd comes in, first class right away, gets the number 1 player in the state, gets Zadrius Rainey Sale. That's awesome. And then he gets Jonathan Epperson, who at the time was the number 2 ranked player in the state. So you make an investment with those guys at the top, and obviously you want that to pay off again in 2026 with Derek Coleman Brusa. But it's also about taking guys like this that you really like. I want to just, it's not necessarily that much of a throwback, but a throwback on the recruiting just trail, if you will. Joe Tryon. This is the same kind of way as taking Joe Tryon when he was at Hazen, where it's, hey, this is a guy who we really like everything about his frame, his projectability, all that sort of stuff. He's not necessarily the highest rated guy, but he's somebody when you look at his frame, you look at everything that he does, you say, I really like where this is going, and you take him now and you figure everything else out later. And if he develops the way you want him to, that's awesome. And when I look at Ah Deong Yang, that's exactly what this can be.
No, that's I know it's a defensive lineman, but it's a perfect comp in that sense of, I remember, kind of thinking about when he was coming out, but first of all, Seaman May Madness and those sort of, camps around the area. And you think it's like, okay, you know what, this is, you can see what the type is. It's not just, hey, let's take the in-state kid to take an in-state kid. I forgot who the other guy was that was a Jimmy Lake take in 21, where it was a defensive lineman and he was, saying like, hey, he's 6 foot, 6'5", 285, or, whatever it was. And it was like, okay, like this one seems a little more of a stretch. And I think the reason why we can't remember the name is because it wasn't in the caliber of Joe Tryon, where you could see the size and projectability of what Pete Kukowski wanted to do with those Bucks back in the day. Now it's the edge position, whatever you want to call it. But you could see like the mindset that was there versus just an in-state take to have an in-state take. I do want to say a real surprising number, because the in-state number is 8 when you compare the first 2 classes, right? Because it's 22 and 23 for Kalen. You don't really count 24.
That's fair. Yeah.
6th. Here's the catch, though. Ryan Otten, Tristan Dunn. The only one that's really playing is Landon Hatchett. Like that's so when you look at the impact of what you're getting versus you look at some of those other guys. It was Parker Brailsford. It was X, Y, and Z. So Lance Holtzclaw. So he got contributors. But I think also in a sense, it's kind of what we're talking about, where you don't always want to take the in-state guy to say, hey, you know what, we're going to have an entire starting 22 of in-state guys. And that's no disrespect to the kids in the state of Washington, but it's like, it's the Brandon Wellington take. Like, look, if you're a contributor, you're in the two deeps, you're starting, you're making an impact, and you're starting by the end of your career Washington, that's where you should be. Some of these guys, maybe you can start earlier or whatever with the Miles Gaskins, but each kid is different. So that's why it's about not just being in state, but the evaluation. That's why it's why it's important to get these guys early on in the process.
No, I really like where you're going with that, where you're absolutely right. It's not just, hey, in-state is the only thing. But you think about it and you always say you need some of those guys on the roster. Where I think about, Carson Bruner talked about the Apple Cup and having to teach so many guys on this roster about it. You want more guys like that, where it's connections to the program in one way or another that are from the area. That's the biggest thing, and that's a really important part of the stake as well. But Lars, we got to talk about the quarterback scenario, because I think Jedd Fisch might have tipped his hand, which we'll get to right after message from our good friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. This is FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And speaking of the NFL, got to go back to the well here. Jayden Daniels was fantastic in the second half against the Cowboys. If he can just keep playing like that, Cliff Kingsbury can do a better job calling plays for him. I think we're still just love that Jayden Daniels Rookie of the Year bet over on FanDuel. Go check out those odds and so many more over on FanDuel. So, Lars, Jedd Fisch said some interesting things during his Monday press conference about the quarterback battle. You asked him, hey, any decision made there? And he said, yeah, I do have a decision. And one thing that really just kind of perked up my ears when he said it was, it's like, yeah, Will has done a good job just taking a step back, taking a deep breath, doing that sort of stuff. And he said, Damon, when he's getting in there and he's got his opportunities, he's doing a really good job and he's really making the most of it. And that leads me to believe that he might be leaning towards Damon Williams.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like there's no necessarily wrong answer, but there is, because if the answer is Will Rogers, it's like, why? If the answer is Damon, you can say, hey, at least we gave it a shot. Like I've been saying on the pod, like the last week and a half. If you start Damon and let's say he struggles in the first half, it goes, 7 of 18 for like 110 and 2 picks, and you don't move the ball. Then you throw in Will and say, hey, look, we're going to give Will a couple of drives in the second half, see if anything changes, and then if not, we'll go back to Damon. And it's not that would be like the worst case scenario. But if anything, you're giving your best hand early. You're letting Damon take in those reps, because either way, you've anointed him as the guy next year. So why not let him have a running start? And it honestly makes sense where you can say, look, Damon played in all 12 games, maybe 13 with a bowl game, and he can say he has 1 or 2 starts. That is like the perfect situation, because Shaker Kendall, the only other guy who's going to have experience in the room, at least right now on the roster, I believe had 6 starts, 4 or 5, 6 starts somewhere in the back end of his Northern Colorado season as a redshirt freshman or freshman. My point is, he didn't have a whole season, but he had sporadic games. So that way it gives Damon, look, you got 2 starts. Shay's got 4 just in case, if something happens in the offseason or, whatever the case may be, there's at least, a backup option in that respect. But yeah, there's no reason. And I also love the fact that, I don't know if you saw it on Sunday, but Jedd retweeted something about Dan Lanning.
I did see that. Yeah, that was
how he defends the RPO. But if I went back during the press conference because I was about to ask about it, he undid the retweet. So it's one of those where it's like Jedd kind of quietly tipping his hand, like, "Hey, look how Dan Lanning defends the RPO." And it's like, well, there you go.
So I think that just the playmaking ability because I want to kind of make sure we tie these last 2 things in here together. But one of the reasons that you can certainly start Damon in this game, where, we talked to our buddy Jake Butt about why he wouldn't want Damon starting at the whiteout, is just that factor of that's not an environment you want to thrust somebody into for their first start. But you can also look at this from the other side of things, where there's not necessarily a lot of pressure if he ends up being the choice here. And I say that because all of the pressure is on Oregon, where I think about this in a similar vein to the way last year's Apple Cup played out. And I'm not comparing Washington to last year's Coug team by any stretch of the imagination. We're not doing that. I mean that in terms of the record and in terms of the stakes for each team. The Cougs came into that game looking to play spoiler, just like Washington is trying to do this week, because we know that no matter what happens, Oregon is going to the Big Ten championship game next week. But you can at least try to start to knock them off their throne, where, I mean, of course, I know you and I expect Ohio State to win this weekend, and that be the matchup part 2. But wouldn't it feel really good for this Washington team to not only moving forward, but to send them into that game with a bit of a black eye? Like, it's something you talked about a little bit on the Monday show, but no matter what it is, wouldn't you like to just put that first real punch in there on your arch rival, and then you just kind of say, hey, yeah, we did our part. Now it's on the rest of the nation to make sure our arch rival doesn't win a national championship.
Yeah, I mean that you're playing spoiler. You're playing like we were saying, like, this is the best bowl opponent you're gonna have. Like whoever you face in that bowl, whatever the bowl ends up being, is not going to be better than the number 1 team in the country. It ain't even be close. So this is your bowl game. This is the 1-game season that Jedd talked about 2 weeks ago. It's everything that is built up to be. And yeah, you're 6-5. You're not going to go to the playoffs. You're not going to get a 5-loss team in the playoffs, even if you beat 2 top 10 teams. That, those sort of things. And I would love for Jedd to make that case, but it's never going to happen. So you have to view it as, okay, let's maximize this 1 game, and then after this 1 game, we'll see who's going to come back next season, and we'll figure everything else out. Basically, Jedd's like, look, you guys can do whatever the heck you want to do after this game is over. You can literally drive back home. You can do whatever. Win on Saturday, you can do whatever you want. And I think it's almost it's a way of letting, not again within reason here, but it's allowing the team to be free. And it's like, again, there's no pressure on Washington. The mini 4th graphic here, because I don't think we're doing 4 whole set. Like, you correct me if I'm wrong. So tying kind of both of them together, like, there is no pressure. Like, if Damon struggles. Okay, that doesn't preclude him. That doesn't mean, oh, I'm not sure if Damon's the guy. Maybe we need to go get a transfer portal quarterback and somebody like a veteran to be a grad, almost like a Will Rogers 2.0, maybe a running quarterback. And it's like, no. Like, Damon's going to be the guy. We all know what's happening, all this and that. And I think almost, I don't know if we've kind of seen it in the offense per se, but like when you look at the offense when Damon's in, there just seems to be a different kind of like beaten rhythm where it's like, hey, like,
sure,
cool. It's like, hey, like, the teachers are gone, school's out for summer. It's like, hey, like we're running free.
Right. It's again, we're on the same wavelength today, because that's what I wanted to bring up, where you talk about no pressure. It's that where we look at the second half against UCLA. Once he came into the ball game, like, yeah, the offense changed in a whole number of ways, and it kind of felt like Jedd was more comfortable, obviously, calling things to get him on the move and utilize his athleticism in space, which is a huge part of Damon playing quarterback. But on top of that, there's just a different level of pace from the offense as a whole, where with Will, and it's not a knock, because this is clearly what he's comfortable with. It's a more slow paced, hey, we're going to get the play call. We're going to just go through things just at the pace that is best for Will. Well, with Damon, it's finding ways to keep the defense off balance as best as possible. And that's with speed, because not only are you seeing speed once the play starts from Damon or from whoever else is on the field, but you're seeing that speed between plays. You're seeing them get to the line quickly, and then you can make the adjustments there, which is great. And that's, something obviously where Jedd preaches the NFL, something you're going to have to sell at the NFL level. And as much pressure as there's going to be in terms of the environment and the atmosphere that's going to be Autzen Stadium, all the pressure in the game is on Oregon to beat a middling Washington team, a team that has not lived up to the expectations, especially in their minds. Lars, if you read our comments, they're Oregon fans who, hey, just for all the Duck fans out there, we didn't ask. It's great when they come in. Oh, Oregon's gonna win by 50. That's great. Thumbs up. I just want to make sure we got that in there. It's hilarious. I love it. But all the pressure is on the Duck sideline. It's on Dan Lanning. It's on that coaching staff to get it right. Jedd Fisch and his coaching staff can play free, and they can do exactly what they want to.
You hit the nail on the head. It's really on Dan Lanning. It's because, if you think about it, if you go 0-4 against Washington, like, when was the last Oregon coach to go winless in their first 3 seasons against Washington?
I truly couldn't tell you.
Like that, like, you can say how great of a defensive mind he is and all that, but that's going to hang with him for a minute. So it's like, I'm sure Lanning will be motivated, and they're playing for clicks, we're playing for wins and all that sort of stuff. But it's just like, there's just something about landing where it's just like, but again, the problem is with Kalen, Kalen seemed like his kryptonite, where it's like Kalen wasn't perfect, but he really seemed to have his Dan Lanning's number more often than not.
Right.
You look at Jedd, and we got blown out of Arizona in 21, and I think that game was at Eugene. And actually, if you go,
that game I don't count for a variety of reasons.
No, I don't. But there's a great photo that is Jedd going ballistic on the sidelines and it being restrained that you might have to send you later on.
Oh, please do.
But it's beautiful. But it's almost like, this is kind of the perfect opportunity for Jedd to say, look, if I lose this game, whatever. Almost like let things go. Like go for it on fourth down. Now, again, don't put yourself in
don't
too
do
bad of a
something
position.
Stupid, yeah.
Right, but it's like the reins are really off everybody. And I think it even screams more of that's why you roll with Damon, because the one guy who doesn't handcuff Jedd is Damon.
Sure.
Not that Will does. Again, no, this is not a slight against Will. It's just you just look at them and they're two different quarterbacks. It's not any different. It's like me saying I can't bench 225, but it's like, okay, great. Like hey, what's your point? Like, do you look at this and think I can bench 225? Like, no. Like, come on. Like, don't ask Will to run a 40-yard dash and expect him to have a sub 5.
I can bench 225. Thanks for asking. No, but no, it's the freedom. It's the freedom of the offense and the play calling and all those other different things. I love where you're going with that. But Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers tuning in. And thank you so much for making Locked On Huskies your first listen today. Now for your second listen, check out the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Our guy Craig Sheeman puts the Big Ten first. When everyone else overlooks it, you can find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever else you listen to your podcast, which is also where you can find this show. To make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you don't miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop right down below in the comments section. And if you're audio only, please leave us 5-star reviews. It does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.